This is a book ball summary of the book The Psychology of Intelligence by Jean Piaget. How can we test our children's intellectual abilities? This has been under research until the Swiss psychologist Jean Piaget entered the field of child psychology. Now when you think of developmental psychology, his name springs to mind. His theory of learning lies at the very heart of the modern understanding of the human learning process, and he is celebrated as the founding father of child psychology. Piaget showed that children are not more error-prone than adults. They simply reasoned in entirely different ways. Let's examine his theories and core concepts. Number 1. Intelligence is action. When beginning a new investigation, one of the first things scientists do is to find their research subject, to question what it is precisely that they're trying to analyse. In 1942, Piaget found himself in exactly the same position when he gave a series of lectures on the psychology of intelligence at the Collège de France in Paris. At the time, psychology, or the science of mind, was a relatively new discipline. Even newer was research into the nature of intelligence itself, which had only emerged 2 decades earlier in the 1920s. Piaget's subject at the time was a question as simple to state as it was complex to solve. What is intelligence? To answer his question, Piaget first considered, then rejected earlier theories. One held that there was an objective reality out there in the world, and a subjective world inside our heads. We perceive outer reality through our senses and the information we read or hear from others. Number 2, adaptation governs all interactions between organisms and their environments. How do pond snails react if you pluck them out of the calm waters they favour and drop them into fast-flowing mountain streams? Piaget, a precocious child with active intelligence, decided to find out. The answer? The snail develops tougher, rounder shells. In a word, adapt well. While Piaget eventually became a renowned psychologist, as a young man in the early 20th century, his great love was biology. Adaptation, therefore, played a key role in Piaget's view of the world. If you want to understand the relationship between any living organism and its environment, he argued, look at how it adapts. Consider we humans. When we eat something, our digestive system reacts to this sudden intrusion of foreign matter into the body by releasing acids and triggering abdominal muscles to contract. For Piaget, this is an example of accommodation, a type of adaptation in which an organism changes its structure in response to an interaction with its environment. Number 3. We organise knowledge to adapt cognitively to the world. Piaget claimed adaptation is both psychological and cognitive. Our bodies and minds may be different, but they are engaged in the same task. The body has biological structures like the stomach. Our minds have mental structures. Both regulate our interaction with the environment. The world is full of information. Every second we're bombarded by massive amounts of perceptual and sensory stimuli. This constant flow of incoming data would be overwhelming if we weren't able to organise it somehow. As it's clear that we can cope, there must be a system doing this organising. Piaget posited the existence of schemata to explain how we do it. Schemata are organised units of knowledge about the world or how to behave in it. These are stored in a kind of cognitive filing cabinet. When we interact with our environment, we consult this cabinet to see if there's anything in there that can help us make sense of what's in front of us. Number 4. Intellectual assimilation and accommodation drive cognitive development. Imagine a young child going for a walk with his mother. They stop at a tree, and she points to an animal that adults call a squirrel. What is that animal? She asks. He thinks for a moment before asking. It's a dog. We can say a couple of things about the boy's answer. First, it's wrong. For Piaget, this isn't a particularly interesting observation. Secondly, it's perfectly logical. The boy hasn't seen a squirrel before, but he has seen a dog. Presented with new stimulus, he consulted his filing cabinet and pulled up the dog schema. Dogs, it says, are 4-legged animals with fur and tails. When you put it like that, squirrels do resemble dogs. And that, Piaget thought, is interesting. What's going on when a child misidentifies a squirrel as a dog? Piaget believed that it was an example of assimilation. Number 5. The search for equilibrium propels us through discrete stages of cognitive development. There are 2 ways in which we respond to our environments. The first is an act directed outward towards the world. The second is an act internalised as a thought. These acts, according to Piaget, are response to needs. The feeling that something is missing determines the goal of the behaviour. When you feel cold, for example, you seek what is missing: warmth. This is an example of the first kind of act. What form does this seeking take, though? This is where cognition, the second kind of act, enters the picture. Cognition structures or guides this behaviour. For example, by providing schemata to locate a blanket or thermostat. Both acts have the same goal: to create a state of balance or equilibrium between the individual and her environment. Equilibrium is a state of a harmonious balance between the individual and her environment. In this state, a child can assimilate the stimuli she encounters into existing schemata. Number 6. In the first stages of development, infants discover the existence of independent objects. During the first 24 months of their lives, infants embark on a remarkable journey of discovery. The newborn's physical structure gives her ready-made sensory motor functions to explore her world. She can perceive sights and smells and coordinate these perceptions with movements or motor responses. Thanks to these functions, she's far from helpless. Take innate skills like the sucking reflex. When a newborn's lips are stimulated, she'll reflexively respond by making sucking movements. She also quickly learns from experience to distinguish between various stimuli. If she's hungry, she'll reject the skin around her mother's nipple and only suck at the nipple itself, suggesting an early form of recognition. But these advances are only the start of the journey. Despite their increasing complexity, sensory motor functions are limited by one crucial factor. The infant only accepts the reality of what she can perceive. For instance, if her mother's face appears in her visual field, she looks at it. If it disappears, she stops looking. However, if an adult places her keys in a drawer, she knows that they will still be there several hours later, even though she hasn't seen or touched them. This is called decentering. Because she understands that objects exist independently of herself, she also grasps higher order concepts like cause and effect, and reasons appropriately. If the keys aren't in the drawer, for example, they still exist, and someone must have taken them. Since only her husband had access to the drawer, he must have had them. Such reasoning allows us to navigate the world effectively. Number 7. Children are egocentric in the pre-operational stage of development. Think back to the woman's reasoning about how her keys might have disappeared. Piaget refers to cognitive acts, like her deductions about cause and effect, as operations. Logic, as we'll see later on, is at the heart of operational thought. During the second stage of development, which lasts from the ages of roughly 2 to 7, children possess a concept of the object and begin exploring the relationships between things in their environment. This exploration, however, is pre-operational. While children do attempt to analyse how objects or ideas fit together, they approach this task intuitively and don't yet display an ability to combine, separate, compare, or transform ideas logically. Number 8. Mastering the principles of conversation, reversibility, and classification mark children's third stage of development. The third stage of cognitive development is a milestone in a child's life. Between the ages of 7 and 11, she becomes capable of operational thought. That is the application of logical rules to objects. This is a breakthrough, but it does have one important caveat. At this stage, logical operations are restricted to physical objects rather than abstract ideas, which is why Piaget termed this the concrete operational stage. What kind of logic do children use in this stage of development? Let's take conservation. Conservation refers to the idea that something retains its identity, that is, it remains the same even when its outward appearance changes. 1 ton of feathers, for example, weighs as much as 1 ton of marble. Weight is conserved, whatever form it takes. Grasping this concept is one of the most transformative changes a child undergoes as she moves into the concrete operational stage. Number 9. Thought becomes increasingly abstract as it reaches maturity. If the black cat is larger than the white cat, and the white cat is larger than the brown cat, which is the largest cat? According to Piaget's theory of cognitive development, the ability to solve this kind of problem marks the advent of mature, or adult, intelligence. This stage is defined by formal operations, and it begins around age 12. Unlike concrete operations, formal operations are not restricted to solving tangible problems, like counting marbles on a tabletop. They can also be applied to abstract problems, like the relative sizes of hypothetical cats. Put differently, thought now begins to treat thoughts as objects that can be manipulated by the mind. Let's return to the question about cat's eyes. How was it solved? In a word, by deduction. Deductive reasoning begins by stating premises. If these are true, it follows that the conclusion must also be true. When she reaches this stage of development, a child does not need to compare 3 cats physically to determine which is the largest. What's your most important key takeaway? Please comment down below and share the video if you like it. Check out these other 2 videos. Thank you, and until next time.